Welcome to Syndicated Nightmares, where each week we take a deep dive into an episode of Freddy's Nightmares based on the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. This week, hosts Dave and Michelle talk about Season 2, Episode 18, titled Funhouse, original air date February 11th, 1990, directed by Gilbert Adler, and written by Al Katz and Gilbert Adler. So the description of this one is, in this follow-up to Welcome to Springwood, a couple moves into a house that's allegedly haunted, but after a few strange occurrences, the wife realizes who the ghost is. Later, another couple moves into the house and form a most unusual relationship with the moving man.
So when it said that it was a sequel to Welcome to Springwood, I thought that it was going to take place in the house that the husband murdered his wife in. That was the episode earlier in the season where the husband was actually a serial killer and the wife found out throughout the episode, right?
Yeah, that would that would have made sense.
That would have made more sense, but this is in like a mansion, and the only connection to Welcome to Springwood is that we have Turk the moving guy, because
Right.
he was in Welcome to Springwood as well.
And he wasn't that up like that was the first part with the husband murdering his wife, and then the second part was the second part of Welcome to Springwood was the woman finding the diary and like having these visions of the past and who lived there before.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Like that episode also, like the only connection was the moving guy. Like I think the apartment she lived in was completely different from what happened in the first half of the episode.
Turk the moving guy. I mean, I guess he really gets around as a moving guy would, I guess, but yeah, we'll talk about it during this episode, but it Turk seems to leave boxes behind on the moving van a lot, and that gets
Right.
him into big trouble with every episode that he's in. So yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, and he hits on anything that moves. Like I remember that from the from the past episode. Like why won't he leave these women alone?
Oh right, and he uses the same pickup line on like all the women.
Mm-hmm.
So okay,
Yeah.
so we start off with Emma. Emma and her husband have recently moved into this mansion, and she doesn't believe that the mansion is haunted, even though Turk is trying to convince her that it is. He tells her that 80 years ago, a man suspected his wife was having an affair, so he told her that he was going out of town, and he really didn't, and instead he snuck back into the house and caught his wife having an affair with some guy and ends up killing her. Like, he slits her throat. The affair, if it was 80 years ago in 1990 when this episode aired, that would be 1910. So we are definitely over the 100-year mark of when this man allegedly killed his wife. I just thought that was fun.
That's neat.
So now it was 110 years ago that this happened.
And the husband that's moving in there is actor Clayton Landy, the Lorenzo, the lecherous orderly in Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
So apparently he and Taryn did not have a fun night at Club Meth because he ended up marrying some woman named Emma. Well, his name in this episode is Robert. Yeah.
Wait, his name is Robert Palmer, which is like the name of that singer who sang Addicted to Love.
Oh, right. Yeah, Addicted to Love and Simply Irresistible. That's the same song. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, but I have a great story about meeting Clayton Landy. This was probably like 2003, 2004. I was driving around with my then boyfriend, and we saw this sign for real estate open house, and it said, the realtor's name and picture on it was Clayton Landy. And we're driving by, and I was like, I think I know that name. And then it hit me, and I was like, he was in Nightmare on Elm Street 3. We have to go. And the open house was happening like right then that day. So we went to the open house and, just acted like we were just there to see the house and look around. And it was a really nice house. And he was there. And so I'm sure I wasn't all that convincing, but I acted like I just, was there to look at the house and just happened to recognize him. And I was like, "Were you in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3?" And he thought it was really funny. He was super nice and quoted his Club Meth line, and yeah, he was really really sweet and nice and happy to be recognized.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so happy to hear when like
Yeah.
actors are nice to fans, even like after the movie has come out decades later. It's so funny because when I'm at work and I'm like strolling a cart down the hallway, I always think, I got the keys to heaven, baby. Like every single time that line goes through my head. So yeah, I'm so glad that he was in this episode. I did not expect it at all. I didn't read ahead that he was in it. So.
But yeah, so he and Emma are married, and there's Turk the moving guy is there, and then they also have this maid, Jillian, who they didn't hire. She just said she comes with the place.
Yeah, and she made some remark that she gets paid on the 10th of every month by some like anonymous source.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was weird information to lay out there.
Right.
So Turk, when Robert leaves the room, Turk starts to hit on Emma, and he has his classic line of saying, "Hey, you're new in town and I'm a native of this place, so if you ever need to know what's happening, give me a call." And that's like his pickup line for all the women that he helps move in.
Mm-hmm. And she's kind of flirtatious with him, but she ultimately turns him down. And then the chandelier shakes and falls for seemingly no reason.
Yeah, I think, is she in the kitchen or the living room when this happens?
I don't remember.
I think she's in the kitchen when this happens, because I remember when I watched it, I thought, what a strange place for a chandelier, just to be like in the kitchen. If it was like the dining room or living room, I could understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the chandelier just rattles and falls like it's an earthquake. And then we cut to Freddy, and he's holding a prism, like a crystal prism for some reason.
And then we're back in the house, and there's the painting of the old couple. I guess this couple from 1910, and it's this creepy looking husband and wife painting.
Mm-hmm. And I was watching on a smaller screen, so maybe this is why, but I thought that the wife from 1910 looked identical to the maid, and I thought that we were going to discover that the maid was actually the wife from 1910 because they looked so much alike.
That would have been better than the actual twist.
Yeah. So like the whole time I was watching this, I was like, oh, when are they going to reveal that the maid is actually the wife from 1910? But spoiler, it never happens. So
yeah, and I guess we can talk about this at the end of this segment, but the maid like didn't really even need to be in the episode. Like she doesn't advance the story at all.
No, So yeah. that was kind of bizarre to have a maid there for really no reason, unless they just needed a reason to give like exposition on the house, but that's what you had Turk for.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's unpacking boxes and she finds this wrapped gift, which is an anniversary gift from Colin, who is her he's her ex-husband. Were they married?
Yeah, they were married, and she left him for Colin's best friend, who is Robert.
Mm-hmm.
So Colin gave them an early anniversary gift of handcuffs with a little jabbing joke of, maybe this will help you two stay together, since obviously Emma has a reputation of loving and leaving her men.
And then Robert is going to go to the bedroom, and then Emma's alone in the study, and she sees this painting start bleeding, like the wife's throat has been slashed.
Mm-hmm.
There's blood coming out, and she runs and gets runs and gets Robert, and they come back, and the painting's fine. Which I thought that was a cool image, the painting bleeding. It was nice and creepy.
Oh yeah, it reminded me of like a haunted house prop, when you're walking through and each room has something scary in it. And yeah, it's just this painting, and right at her neck, you just have blood seeping down. So yeah, I thought that was cool, and I had hoped that they would do something more with it, but it seemed like it was just a hallucination.
They sort of set it up like it's this gonna be this cool haunted thing, but it doesn't really go that direction.
Emma calls Robert down, and they see that the painting is just fine. And then Emma has a dream that Colin comes over when she's sleeping in bed with Robert, and he handcuffs her and then kills Robert right in front of her for, because he wants her back and all that. So Emma has this dream that Colin handcuffs her and then kills Robert in front of her because he wants her back. And then Turk, the moving guy, comes in and kills Colin to rescue Emma. But it was all a dream.
And then she wakes up to the maid there, and the maid says that Robert went to buy a new lighting fixture to replace the chandelier.
Yeah, so they did mention the falling chandelier, even though it has nothing else to do with the story.
Right. Gotta have that chandelier for the kitchen.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, and so Emma's all absorbed by this painting, and Colin comes to the door, and he tells her that he's still in love with her, and she kicks him out, and she's like, I don't want you to love me.
Yeah, it was, the whole phrasing of that scene was really weird, because she was like, I've already been loved by you, and I don't want to be loved by you again. And I was thinking, is loved like a code word for something else here?
Right.
Yeah, it was just really weird phrasing of the term love. But yeah, he loves her. She doesn't want him to, and so she kicks him out and tells him to never come back. Just leave me alone. So she kicks Colin out, and then she goes into the study, and she sees that Turk is in the house. He just let himself in. So she threatens to call the Springwood Police Department, and he's like, I heard your entire fight. Like, you can't call the cops on me.
Right. Which, yeah, doesn't really make any sense.
So she calls the cops, but Turk refuses to leave, and before she can tell the cops what's going on, he basically calls her bluff on calling the cops, and she hangs up on the operator without giving any information. And so Turk is all trying to seduce her with his cool and suave moves. So Emma is playing along, and she's like, yeah, let's do this. I'm really attracted to you. And she pulls out the handcuffs that Colin gave to her to use on Robert, and she handcuffs Turk to the fireplace, kind of arms stretched out like Jesus on the cross, sort of. So Turk cannot move at all.
And then she demands to know how he made the chandelier fall and the painting bleed, because she thinks he's behind everything. And then I kind of like this scene. Robert walks in, and there's the moving guy is handcuffed to the fireplace, and his pants are unbuttoned, and he's got lipstick on his collar, and it doesn't look good for Emma. And yeah, and Robert's been established as the jealous type already.
Well, wouldn't you kind of be if you met your significant other because he cheated on his spouse for you? Yeah. I would be a little worried.
Makes sense. And then I wrote in my notes, one of the things Turk says to her in this scene is, you've never been faithful to anyone in your entire life.
So I have this theory about relationships that with the amount of drama that you enter into a relationship is also the same amount of drama you will leave when that relationship is over.
Yeah, so if it begins under crazy circumstances, it's going to end under crazy circumstances?
Yeah, that baggage is always going to follow you throughout the entire relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, so my wife and I joke that neither she nor I had any baggage when we were coming into our relationship when we first met. We were both completely single. We had been single for months, and there was just no drama at all. And it was, I think, probably like the first time that there wasn't drama before one of us had started a relationship. So it just like kind of worked.
Mm-hmm.
And, 12 years later, we're fine.
Oh, that's really nice. I don't think I've ever like left someone for someone else. I think like all my breakups were like because I just didn't want to be with that person anymore, or they didn't want to be with me anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I also see it
Mm-hmm.
as like if you break up with someone to be with someone else, it's because you didn't want to be with that person anyway.
Right.
But no, I totally see what you're saying.
But anyway, Robert gets all upset and walks off, and Emma follows after him, and so Turk is there handcuffed by himself, and then it wrote he disappears into the wall Scooby-Doo style.
Yes, that's
like
perfect.
like the fireplace moves back and then it like resets and he's not there anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Scooby-Doo is the perfect way to describe that scene. Emma and Robert come back into the room where the fireplace is, and the fireplace is there, but Turk is not. And they're just like, oh, okay, well, I guess he had to go. Like they're not alarmed at all.
And then I guess there's a dream sequence where Emma has this dream where Turk crashes through the window and they start making out on the floor. Like he crashes through the window and it makes all this broken glass on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're making out on the broken glass, and then she's in the study and she looks up at the painting and the ghost isn't there anymore.
Oh, the husband isn't there anymore?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he appears in the room and he comes at her with a knife.
It was kind of a cool scene because when she looks up at the painting, the husband is missing from the painting, and then she looks over to the desk area and it's like his ghostly image is just sitting there watching them. He stands up and he's like, "You deceitful little bitch, I knew you were cheating on me." It was like, whoa. Yeah. This escalated quickly.
And I looked him up. The guy who played the husband / ghost was like a producer on the series who directed a lot of the episodes.
Oh, okay. So maybe he was just available that day for...
Yeah. It's like his only acting credit. Yeah, because they were like, "You look like an angry husband from 1910."
I wonder if he kept the painting that he's in.
Oh, I bet he did.
I totally would. I'd have it above my mantle forever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
So the ghostly husband, he calls her a bitch and you've been cheating on me this whole time, and he goes over to slice her throat and she wakes up screaming. And she looks up at the painting, and the husband and wife are both in the painting. The painting's fine. Everything's all right.
Oh, and we also see that there's somebody watching her from behind the wall after she wakes up.
Oh, right. That was kind of freaky. Like, that was kind of like a Black Christmas 1974 moment.
Oh, yeah.
I just recently watched that. That's the only reason why I was able to reference that.
Right. It's a great movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw it for the first time a few weeks ago, right around Christmas time, especially when the remake came out. And I am very surprised that it took me this long to watch that movie, because I feel like it's such a classic that opened the door to almost every slasher flick that's available now.
Like, it's weird that like it came out 4 years before Halloween, but like Halloween gets sort of the credit for inventing the modern slasher movie.
I think Halloween became more mainstream and pop culture more than what Black Christmas did, because Black Christmas was more tabooed than Halloween. So maybe that has something to do with it. It's just that Halloween is more readily available than Black Christmas ever was.
Yeah. Did you see the new one?
I did not.
The remake that
No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see the 2000 whatever remake, and I didn't see the 2019 remake.
You saw the best one.
Okay. I figured. I know it isn't, the newest one isn't getting high remarks on plot and everything else, so I might watch it if it's on demand somewhere, or if it's streaming somewhere.
Yeah, I liked what they were trying to do, but it's a bit of a mess.
I know, like, one of my friends who she was indifferent on it, and we were discussing why it was called Black Christmas if it didn't really go along with the original. And she said that her thought is Black Christmas 1974 dealt with abortion and women's rights and Roe versus Wade had just been legalized. That was the big issue then. And now, I guess this Black Christmas 2019 is about sexual assault on college campuses. And because that's a hot topic right now, and that movie deals with that's kind of why it got the Black Christmas name to it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I
That's
haven't seen it to be able to
Mhm.
say either way, but the friend that I was talking to, she's really smart when it comes to horror movies, so I'll just take her word for it.
I appreciated that it had something to say, but I wish it had been better.
Okay. Yeah, I'll see it when it's streaming somewhere on Netflix maybe, or on Shudder, and then I'll be able to say how I feel about it. Okay.
Excellent. Well, we got a little off topic, but I wrote down because we were talking about dysfunctional relationships before. Like, so the next morning, Emma is talking to Jillian, the maid, and Jillian says, the last time I had a fight with my boyfriend, we didn't talk for 3 weeks, which seems a little extreme.
I would consider that a breakup.
Yeah.
I would consider, like, especially as adults, if I didn't talk to a significant other for like 3 days, like they just ghosted me, I'd be like, well, guess it's time to move on. Maybe it's different because it was 1990s and communication was more asynchronous than it is now.
Yeah, 3 weeks is pretty extreme, though.
It is, yeah.
And I'm not quite sure what prompted this, but then Emma calls Colin and apologizes. And it seems like at this point in the story, she's decided that she wants to be with Colin again.
Yeah, and it seems like she's realizing how possessive and jealous Robert is, and Colin wasn't like that, so she would rather spend the rest of her life with Colin, who may or may not treat her like a princess in a tower sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Then she has this dream sequence where she tells Robert that she's going back to Colin, and he handcuffs her to the fireplace and brands her chest with an A.
Like the Scarlet Letter, yeah.
Yes. And then when she wakes up from that dream, she goes over and she's futzing with the fireplace, and then somehow manages to make it do the Scooby-Doo thing, and it moves back.
The fireplace, when it does the Scooby-Doo thing, it basically just goes into like the secret passage, and she's just walking in between the walls, so kind of like in People Under the Stairs, when the kids that they didn't want, they can like walk through or walk in between the walls and everything. So that's pretty much what it is.
Oh yeah. I wrote tunnel in my notes because I wasn't sure what to call it, but that's a really good comparison.
Okay. So when she's walking in between the walls, she finds the exact painting of the husband and wife that she saw that's above the fireplace. And it has like tubing filled with fake blood and a slit through the wife's neck. So it's obvious that this is a prop painting for blood to come seeping out. So whatever tricks are being pulled, there's someone definitely behind it. We just don't know who yet.
But then she finds the tube of wrapping paper.
Oh, the same wrapping paper that was used for her handcuffs.
Yeah. Then she thinks it's Colin who's been doing it.
So there's a mirror in her bedroom that she shares with Robert, and it's like affixed to the wall, and you are able to see through the mirror on one way, like a police interrogation room. Emma puts 2 and 2 together that the same wrapping paper that was used by Colin to give a gift is next to a mirror that's looking in on her bedroom. So she's kind of creeped out a little bit. And when Colin stops by to profess his love, that's when she's like, well, give me until tonight and I'll give you my answer.
I would be pretty creeped out if I thought my ex were spying into my bedroom.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Robert comes home and decides to, part of her plan, she's going to bring Robert up into the bedroom and start going at it on the bed. Because she wants to, it's a setup. She wants Colin to see her and Robert together.
Yeah, she knows that Colin is watching on the other side of the mirror.
She and Robert are in the bedroom, and then mirror breaks and Colin comes out with a gun.
In a jealous rage, tells Emma his entire plan of why he's even there in the first place.
Which doesn't make any sense at all.
No sense at all. So something along the lines of he knew that Emma wanted a house and he wasn't able to give her one. So, and Robert could. And then while they were divorced, Colin worked to buy this house for her to fix it up so it would have like secret passages and he could watch them or her. And he fixed it up exactly to how she would like it, knowing that she would want to buy it. And while she was living there, his master plan would be to seduce her and win her back, and they could live happily ever after. Because Emma found out his plan, that's no longer going to happen. And there are so many holes in Colin's plan.
So now that I think about it, like I guess the whole like haunting thing was he was trying to make her feel bad for cheating, like that because it was like a husband killed his wife for cheating.
Oh,
but
yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But if she went back to him, then she'd be cheating on her current husband.
Yeah.
Right, because she's married. She married Robert. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, his plan really doesn't make sense because he didn't use any of the information he got from spying on her. All he did was show up at the door and say, "I still love you."
Yeah, like okay. I mean, that just seems like it would have been a heck of a lot easier than going through all the trouble of remodeling a house.
And he couldn't. So, like when they were married, he couldn't afford to buy a house, but now, 1 year later, he's been able to afford a house and remodel it.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So, okay.
They needed to work on the script a little.
Oh yeah, a little bit.
And so she wanted to be with Robert. Then she decided she should be with Colin. Then she found the wrapping paper by the window and realized he'd been spying on her. So now she wants to be with Robert again. And so she was on the bed to taunt Colin.
Mm-hmm. So Colin decides that he's just going to kill them both. But instead of killing them with the gun that he readily has available in his hand, he decides that the spikes that he put in place on the wall above the bed, so it's like a bed of spikes, he's just going to shove the bed into the wall of spikes and kill them that way. And so that's what he does.
Yes.
Yeah, which also doesn't make sense because if he was planning on being with Emma, why would he put spikes in the wall to later kill someone with? Unless it was meant for Robert only.
That's a good point. It never occurred to me to think, why did he put spikes in the wall? Yeah. And if the hope was that Emma would get back together with him and they would live there eventually, I don't think you'd want to sleep on a bed that could be like accidentally flipped into a wall of spikes.
Yeah, because one false move during the heat of passion and both of you are just done for.
Or like they have kids and like the toddler runs into the room and like sets it off. And,
Or the kids are jumping on the bed. Like so many things that could go wrong.
So don't let Colin design your house.
No, not at all. So then we skip to Freddy and he's working on a crossword puzzle. And he says, "What's a 4-letter word for torture?" And he writes in LOVE.
Yeah. And then we are back in the same house and back with, or now where it's a flashback to Turk being chained to the fireplace. Mm-hmm. And as he gets pulled into the Scooby-Doo thing, somebody chloroforms him and he's knocked out. And then he's, tells someone that he woke up a few days later and everybody was gone from the house. Mm-hmm. So as far as anyone knows, Emma and Robert just up and left.
Yeah. And he's talking to the new owners of the house, Evelyn and Victor, and they are married. Victor is in a wheelchair from an accident that recently happened. We don't really get the full story of what happened, just that because of the accident, he is no longer able to be physical with Evelyn, but they still love each other very much. And Julian, the maid, is also there.
And Turk is back to his old self and hitting on Evelyn.
And Evelyn is more open to it than what Emma was, I think, at the beginning of the episode.
I was looking up that actress to see if I knew her from anything, and she was on. I feel like half the episodes I like point out somebody who was on 90210, but she she was in a bunch of 90210 episodes. She like worked with Dylan's dad, and she came back a couple times after Dylan's dad died and worked with Dylan.
Oh, that's right, Jack McKay. He was like in a car explosion, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Of course he was.
But was he like an informant, or there was some whole story with what he was doing?
It was like drug or mob related. It was something big to why his car just randomly exploded.
Right. And I think she was like an FBI or CIA agent or something like that had been working with him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So after Freddy jumps out of the moving box, Turk does his usual move where he comes back and he's like, left a box on the truck. And Jillian tries to get him to leave, but then Evelyn comes downstairs in a nightie. And Turk is hitting on her, and he's like, I know that you, I unpacked the boxes, so I know you sleep in 2 bedrooms and you're not having sex anymore. And Evelyn goes for it. Is this the first time we've actually seen Turk be successful?
I think
seducing
so.
Someone?
Yeah. Well, first Evelyn tells Turk, like, we're not physically romantic, but we still role play, and it's all about Victor having control over me, and he'll tell me to take my clothes off and stuff like that. So they still kind of have a intimate relationship. It just isn't physical because he isn't able to. And and Turk's like, hey, I'm cool with it. I have something that works, like whatever. Turk finally gets the girl and they have sex.
The show has a lot of sex on it. Like
yeah.
Like the movies, I mean, there are a few scenes here and there throughout the series, but there's not that much characters having sex in the movies.
Well, that's true. Well, the characters are usually teenagers in the movies, and then the TV show it was all adults. So I guess it makes sense that it'd be more sexual.
But yeah, she tells him that since Victor can't have sex, they do a role play thing with antique pistols, and he that he'll like point the gun at her and make her strip, and it's this power play thing that they both enjoy.
He and Evelyn are in bed, and you see someone is watching them through the one-way mirror, but you don't learn who it is. Turk hears the wheelchair in the hallway, and he gets all like panicky that Victor's going to start something because he's in bed with Victor's wife.
Turk hides, and Victor comes in and he's got one of the antique pistols, and he sees him and shoots him. And then Evelyn wakes up for real, and it's still the same scenario that Victor's there and Turk is in bed. But Victor is totally fine with it. And he's like, does he make you happy? I just want you to be happy. She asks him to, she says, she turns to Turk and she's like, will you stay forever?
Yeah, it was a very quick agreement between Victor and Evelyn that her affair could continue. I assume as long as it just remained physical, and that Turk could move in and just basically be her little pool boy.
If I had sex with someone once and then they turned to me and were like, will you stay forever? I'd be like, no.
Yeah. Normally I would say yes to that. However, we have to analyze the environment, okay?
Right.
Okay, so obviously they live in a mansion, so they are like mega loaded. Turk is basically probably couch surfing his way through life as a moving guy, always trying to pick up the next woman. So I don't think his financials are really all that set. So yeah, I mean, he likes having sex with Evelyn. He's going to be waited on hand and foot by Jillian, the maid. and
Mm-hmm.
Victor's cool with it. So I think he thinks he has a pretty sweet deal.
That's true. Yeah. And I guess even though she says, "Will you stay forever?" I guess he can, he can leave whenever he wants.
Oh yeah,
He's not
yeah,
really
that's true.
committing to anything. And then we find out that Colin is still in the walls watching them.
Yeah, what's that all about?
And then it's a scene of Turk and Victor in the study, and Victor is talking about guns and women, and he says, like, through you I can satisfy Evelyn again.
Yeah, because Turk is like, why are you letting me do this? Like, be real with me. But I have a logistics question. Do they live in a ranch style mansion? Because if Victor is in a wheelchair, how is he getting up and down to the second and first floor?
Oh, there definitely are stairs, because there's the scene where Turk brings the box back.
Oh, right.
Evelyn comes down the stairs. It's a good question. They have separate bedrooms, so maybe Evelyn's bedroom is upstairs and his bedroom is downstairs.
He still went into Evelyn's bedroom.
Oh, you're right.
So, I mean, maybe there's an elevator off screen somewhere. He just uses that. I don't know.
Or one of those things like the lady in Gremlins has, that you like sit on and it takes you up the stairs.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that's when Freddy should be doing his little segment on that, just going up and down the stairs.
Oh, that would be delightful. Yeah.
He could totally phone that one in. That would be great.
Mm-hmm. And then it's, Turk and Evelyn are having sex again. Colin's watching. Victor, in my notes, just says, Turk and Evelyn have sex. Colin watching. Victor rolls by.
Yep, that sums that scene up.
And then Jillian is telling Turk that it won't work out. She says, like, Evelyn's in love with you and you need danger. And I guess it sort of mirrors the first half of the episode, because it's sort of like Emma, she left this guy for that guy, and maybe she wants to go back, and she can just never be happy committing to someone. Mm-hmm. And now in this, it's like Turk is in that situation that, he hits on everyone, and how's he ever going to be happy, like, with just one person? But
Turk tells her, like, I'm staying, I have a really good gig going on here. Mm-hmm. And so Jillian kisses Turk and then follows her downstairs so they could have sex in the study where Victor sees them. And so, like, Victor rolls by while they're kissing in the study, and they, like, stop kissing, definitely make eye contact with Victor, and they're just kind of like, whatever, and continue kissing, and then that's it. So, like, no respect for whatever arrangement Turk, Evelyn, and Victor have going on here.
Everybody can have sex with everybody.
Apparently. Well, maybe Jillian was feeling left out,
Yeah, then the next scene, Evelyn's really upset because Victor told her what he saw, and she points a gun at Turk and shoots, and then Turk wakes up, and it was just a dream.
When Turk wakes up, Evelyn in real life has a gun pointed on him, and he's like, whoa, like, let's talk about this. And she's like, no, this is part of the role play. You take the gun and make me take my clothes off. So she's trying to do what Victor does with her, which I would say this is when Victor would get jealous, because that's sort of like their thing, Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, you can sleep with my wife, but you can't role play with her. Mm-hmm. That's where I draw the line, buddy. And
Turk is, like, clearly not into it. Like,
no,
she really wants him to do it, but he's like, eh. And then she tells him the gun's unloaded, and it's basically like she's like, I want you to be aggressive and point this gun at me, and she basically goads him into shooting her, because she's like, he points the gun, and she's like, tell me to take my shirt off, and then she refuses, and so he pulls the trigger. And then there's a blast, and it appears that he shoots and kills her.
So he's all panicky, and Jillian, the maid, comes in, and she's like, you have to hide the body. If Victor sees this, like, he'll call the cops, and you'll go to jail. So, like, you just have to hide the body. And at first, Turk doesn't want to. I think he wants to call the cops and be like, no, it was an accident. I didn't mean to do this. But Jillian talks him into it. So he hides Evelyn's body behind the fireplace.
And then, Jillian tells him that Victor loaded the gun, and he was, something in him snapped, and he was just using Turk. And this was Victor's plan all along, to get Victor to shoot Evelyn. And so she tells Turk that the only way out of this is to kill Victor. This whole episode is a bit convoluted.
Mm-hmm. Jillian tells him to shoot Victor, so Turk confronts Victor. Victor is like, no, this wasn't me. It was all Jillian. Jillian did this. And so then Turk shoots Jillian, and then Victor starts like applauding the whole thing, like clapping his hands like he's at some mystery diner theater thing.
Yes. And then he pulls off his face. First Jillian and Evelyn stand up and they're totally fine, and Victor rips off his face, and it turns out it was Colin. Like there is no Victor. It was just Colin in a mask pretending to be in a wheelchair.
I guess it is a murder mystery, but there's like the only participant is the person who is being had, so Turk. Like there's no one in the audience watching. So I don't really know who they're performing for or why.
I guess just themselves, but then also like the whole, how did he think he killed Evelyn? Like, did they put blanks in the gun? Because he shot her at close range, and you think he would have noticed there was no blood or a gunshot, or she still had a pulse, or...
Oh.
I'm just
not... If they had enough money to create a realistic mask for Colin to wear, maybe they had enough money for like stage props, and when the blanks went off in the gun, Evelyn like had a pouch of blood in her gut or something and like popped it so she would start bleeding.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about that. That's a good point.
She must have been really good at that.
I guess so. She's so good she can bleed on command.
And then for some reason they decide to kill Turk on the same like murder bed, the bed lifting up into the spikes.
Yeah, Jillian and Evelyn pretend like they're gonna seduce him and have like this awesome threesome. And so Turk lays on the bed, and then that's when Colin's like, nope, and then spikes him.
And then the next scene, they're on to their next mark. They're all pretending to be French, and a milkman comes in, because that's
a thing
milkmen
in
were still a thing. Yeah, in 1990. So the milkman is their next target, and they're, pretending to be French people.
And then we have Freddy's outro, which is, I think, the most interesting one that we've had to date.
Yes.
So we zoom in on the backside of a blonde woman, and you hear Freddy talking about like a hot blonde. And then the woman looks over her shoulder, and it's Freddy Krueger in drag with a long blonde wig and makeup. Freddy Krueger in drag.
Yeah, that was amazing. And also, it's pretty convincing. Like you actually think you're looking at a hot woman, and then.
Yeah.
It's Robert Englund in Freddy makeup and drag.
Yeah. And then Freddy in drag turns around and gives the audience Turk's pickup line of, "You're new in town and I'm a native. Maybe I could show you around sometime." How did you like this one?
I liked seeing Clayton Landy. I liked the beginning of it, like with the bleeding painting and the man coming, the guy disappearing from the painting and showing up in the study, and then it was pretty much a mess after that.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was one of the better episodes.
I thought it was entertaining, but plot-wise it was all over the place. But just for the sheer theatrics of it, I liked it. It would be an episode for like good background noise, but not one that I would recommend to anyone unless you want to see Freddy in drag. So now is a good time to bring on Clayton.
Pleasure to meet you both. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much for agreeing to talk with us. I told you that Nightmare 3 isn't just my favorite in the series, but my favorite movie of all time.
That completely blows me away on a couple of different levels. I always have to ask when someone says anything remotely close to that to me, At what age did you first see that movie?
I was 9 when I first saw the movie.
Oh my God! I mean, when I made it, I could barely watch it.
No, there's just, well, I'll admit it's not the best movie in the world, but for me,
Not for a small child, no.
No, but it is the one movie I would choose to bring along on a deserted island because it has almost everything in it that I love. So that's why it's my favorite movie.
Please tell me what that is. I really am interested to know why that scores so strongly with you.
It has to do with psychology, and it has Freddy and horror in it. It has Heather Langenkamp in it, and it has you in it. So you can't go wrong with any of those.
Well done. Well, I have a lot of personal connections around that film. I don't know if you're aware. I was sort of a member of the New Line family for a long time. Obviously, you know who Lynn Shay is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Lynn and I were together for 20 years. We were married for 14 and the mother of my son.
Oh, nice.
So there was an interesting that I ended up making 3 pictures with Chuck Russell. And because of the connection to the Shay family, I was told before going into the room for the audition, do not let Chuck know you know anyone. So as opposed to someone wrapping their arm around you and saying, oh, you're the brother-in-law, come be in our movie, it was, you can't let him know you're related to Bob Shay. Oh, and wow. Yeah, so it's one of those great joys as an actor, you know, you really got the film. Yeah. It was, you know, there was no gimme there. Mm-hmm. And I will say, and Michelle, I'll agree with you here. I've done a few horror films, and at least a few. And I've been around the horror and the sci-fi genre a lot. And that was a particularly well-written script. Mm-hmm. You know, Chuck Russell and, oh God, I'm looking at his partner's face right now, and I can't think of his name, who scored Green Mile and Walking Dead.
Frank Darabont.
Frank Darabont.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Frank I knew from, I don't know if you'll remember, you're probably too young. I was a regular on the first half-hour comedy for HBO, First and 10. And Frank was the set dresser on that show.
Oh my God.
and so when I showed up on Nightmare, there was Frank, and I couldn't put the two together. And there's only 3 films that people ever ask me about or ask me to sign something or give me a picture. And 2 of the 3 are Chuck Russell movies. So it's really kind of neat. Mm-hmm. And there's another couple connections. Also, Ken Sagos. Ken and I, about 10 years before that, worked at the only indoor amusement park in America, the World of Sid and Marty Krofft in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years later, here we show up on the set, and we're both looking at each other going, what are you doing here? And then about 10 years after that, by invitation, we were in the only class that Marlon Brando ever taught. So we just sort of touch base every 10 years. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. Really sweet. Yeah, it is crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. Well, we have Chuck Russell in common then, because I was an extra on his film I Am Wrath that filmed in Columbus, Ohio with John Travolta a few years ago.
Oh my. Wow. And so another touchstone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my sleeve made it on screen, so it's not really my claim to fame.
And I wanted to tell you, I met you once about 15 or 16 years ago when you were working as a realtor in Los Angeles.
Oh, my God.
You had an open house in my neighborhood, and I just happened to see the sign for it. And I went to it, and I mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street 3 to you, and you were so nice and so friendly and, you know, laughed about it and quoted one of your lines, and it was a really nice experience meeting you.
Well, I thank you so much. I'm glad I wasn't an asshole.
Quite the opposite.
Because selling real estate was not ever a goal of mine. You know, I didn't grow up wanting to be a realtor. That didn't happen. But Well, frankly, after the second divorce, I found out I developed a nasty habit. I really, really like food with my meals. So for a while there, I was selling real estate in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Well, it was a beautiful house that you were showing.
I'm sure. I was also very fortunate. In the 5 or 6 years I did it, I was successful, and it worked out very well for me. At a period of time where I needed to bridge the income gap, that worked out very well, and still allowed me to work as an actor. In fact, while I was selling, I did a multi-episode on Stargate Atlantis, which sort of ties back to Chuck, because it was exactly 20 years apart. The first time I ever had a life mask done was for the thing that people saw me more for this moment than anything else I've ever done, probably combined. I got sucked down the drain in The Blob.
Yes.
And more people know me for that than for anything else. And that was the second time I worked with Chuck. That was the year after we did Nightmare 3. And then almost to the day, 20 years later, I did Stargate Atlantis. I had the great joy of being bitten by a space vampire. and so again, I had to have a life mask done, which, they pour the solution over your head and you have to breathe through straws while it sets, and then they peel that, and then they make a bust of your head, and then they create the mask out of that. And I happen to have on my shelf the 2 busts, one from The Blob and one from Stargate Atlantis, 20 years apart. It's fun to watch yourself age in plastic.
What was it like filming that scene in The Blob?
The Blob, that was well, it was fun because I got to work with Candy Clark, who was so sweet and so talented. And Chuck gave me in both cases the opportunity to really create a character, not just show up and say words. And so that was a real joy. It was fun to do because you had to do it in reverse. You had to have the apparatus come up through the drain attached to your face, and then do the reverse action of being sucked into the drain. So start with head in and come out as if it was being attached to you, and pull away from it. And then they ran it in reverse to get the activity of being sucked down and in. And then they had puppet masters on a spinning wheel under the sink with a leg and an arm, a bloody leg and a bloody arm, squirting blood. And it was a lot of fun. It was certainly stuff you don't get to see every day on a set. And I'll say the fun thing about playing Lorenzo, as I was saying about it being such a well-written script, as an actor, you read crap every day. But when you can read a script and it immediately suggests something to you, you've got a good piece of paper in your hands. And it was sort of, as soon as I started reading Lorenzo, I started hearing different songs in my head. So every scene as Lorenzo, I was bopping along to another song, and there were songs that came to me. I didn't ever sit down and go, oh, well, he's listening to this here and he's thinking about that there. It just always showed up. And when stuff shows up, a psychological gesture shows up, something shows up, it's a well-written piece of material because the material is doing the work for you.
Do you remember the songs?
I wish that I could. It's possible. Actually, I'll tell you that the last time I watched it, and I can't for the life of me remember why I watched it recently. No, it was a couple of years ago. Must have been on or something, and I knew what was coming up, and I watched it. And as I saw myself bopping down the hall, I heard the music in my head again. So again, tribute to Chuck.
What was the general environment on set like on Nightmare 3?
Well, it was a little bit creepy because of the location. That was, that wasn't a studio set. That was a real location. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of hanging out, instead of hanging out in dressing rooms, you're hanging out in cells. And it was fun. I got to hang out with, well, he was then Larry, now Lawrence Fishburne. You know, that was an early feature for Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at that time Larry Fishburne. So we were a couple of young guys doing a picture, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and hanging out. And I got to hear Coppola stories from him, Apocalypse Now stories. That's my idea of fun. And when I get to hear other people's stories, because then it's actually one of the joys of my life is that all of this work that I've been fortunate enough to do, the good ones always provide stories. And I love telling them, so I love hearing them. And I got to hear his stories because Apocalypse Now was his very first feature, and how he met Coppola and how he was brought to the jungle and all of that stuff was really, really, everybody there was a pleasure to be with. Not always the sense when you're working with the next generation coming up, kids or teenagers, you know,
Mm-hmm.
often you get on a set, they got their own world, you sort of got to break in. Not here. Everybody was really working well together. It was a pleasure. But I think, you know, it's the opposite term. The fish stinks from the head down. You know, the head was Chuck, and it was the exact opposite. Chuck knew how to make a good film, and he knew how to have fun doing it. So he had a really good time making that picture.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. And you worked
and
with.
It was. I'm sorry. No, well, I was going to say, you know, there really was a thing about doing New Line films at that time, and I did a few. There really was a sense of this is the New Line family.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody kind of knew each other, and there was always events or parties or something. When I did Pump Up the Volume, it was like every Friday was a party that he put on. And Chuck, the thing about it was they hired good filmmakers who were on the rise, who really wanted to create something. It was never, there was never a sense on any New Line set was on of let's just make this thing, it's schlock, let's just sell it. Never, ever, ever. Everybody who showed up on a New Line set was trying to make the best film that they could make. And, you know, this was, you know, Wes Craven's legacy.
Yeah.
Wes, filmmaker par excellence. I mean, he's a beautiful writer, he's a beautiful director, and a lovely, lovely, lovely human being. So there was always a great sense of we're making a film together. Not like, let's make a movie and take the check and go home. Not ever.
So at the time you made Nightmare 3, were you already familiar with parts 1 and 2?
Well, yes. Lynn was in the first one.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So I was on the set hanging around for the first one, Johnny Depp's first thing. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I can't think of the name of the casting director, who was a very good friend at the time, who discovered Johnny. Johnny was playing in a knockoff band. And
Annette Benson?
Yes, Annette Benson. Thank you. And let me say how terrible I feel about that. Our kids grew up together. We're still good friends. All of a sudden, I can't think of Annette's name. Oh no, we spent tremendous amount of time together with the kids. And that was wonderful. Annette was, in fact, the one who told me, don't say a word to Chuck that you know Bob. And of course, she cast the first Nightmare. Annette also discovered Nicolas Cage. She just was finding that new young talent around town. And she found Johnny, and that was the first time I met Heather, was on that set. And of course we knew Wes and his wife and spent a lot of time with them. Just a lovely, brilliant filmmaker, Wes Craven. That was a joy to be there and watch him and see the way he created. Nothing but a wonderful learning experience for a young actor. Well, we were fortunate, you know, again, good filmmakers trying to do, nobody just trying to make something so they could get to the next picture. Always trying to make the best film that they could make. And look at the people who came up through there, Rachel Talalay. It was just a great time to be around exciting filmmakers.
Yeah, I noticed in your filmography you worked with Rachel Talalay a few times on projects.
A few times.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Rachel's a classic New Line case. Rachel starts out as a PA and works her way up to being one of the best directors in the genre. And it was all Bob Shea and Sarah Risher giving her those, recognizing the talent in this human being and helping bring her along. And so I worked with her as an assistant director, as a director. She was director and producer. I worked with her husband, Rupert. Rupert, her husband, was a producer on The Blob.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it was family. And it was funny when an outsider would come in and didn't get it. and I'm not going to mention the name, and I do remember this name, the casting director on the Blob, didn't know, apparently, that I knew Rupert and Rachel, that I'd already worked with Chuck, that Frank knew me, that I was associated with the New Line family. And she tried, and I said, this was one of those business things. I went in for Chuck, and I read for a couple of different roles. And I will say, I'll give myself just a little pat on the back, that I remember hearing Chuck say to someone else as I was passing by, man, that Clayton, he always gives you something. And so Chuck put me in 3 pictures because he always found that I had something. I never came looking to get. I always came looking to give. Mm-hmm. And he was a filmmaker who appreciated that. And I knew that Chuck wanted me in the film. I knew that Rupert wanted me in the film. I knew that there was another association there that they were happy to have me on board. But the casting director didn't know all this and tried to get me cheap. And worse than tried to get me cheap, she was trying to cut me out of basic things that were in the contract. And forgive me again for the sidebar. I know contract. I'm currently the president of the SAG-AFTRA Atlanta local. Contract is not a weak spot for me.
Yeah.
And my agent was going, she wants this and she wants this and this. I said, well, just tell her no. Oh no, you can't say no to her. I said, yeah, I really can. And in fact, in this case, more than any other, everybody else but me everybody else but her wants me on this picture. So yeah, go say no to her and see what happens. And, it's also been said of me, I never met a bridge that wasn't worth burning. And in that particular case, I did not mind burning hers.
Well, no, that's good that you stuck up for yourself because you were in the position that you were able to. So hopefully that taught that casting director that, you can't treat actors that way.
Exactly right. And that's, it's something that young actors really don't understand. They never understand when you're coming up the power of no. Mm-hmm. You really can say no. It's not the end of your life or the end of your career. If you've got what it takes, if you've been training, if you're ready to rock and roll, and you come in ready to show them every single time, you got the stuff and you do the homework, no is a good word to have in your pocket.
And when you were cast on Freddy's Nightmares, was that also part of being New Line family?
It was in a sense family, but in this case, not New Line family. Gil Adler, the producer of the series, was an old friend of Lynn's. They went way back to off-Broadway New York days. And so we were friends with he and his wife. And Gil produced the series. And this was his first time directing. And he asked me to do it. I didn't have to read for that. He asked me to do that episode, which pretty much that's most of what I remember from that it was so sweet to have a friend ask me to come to work. And we had a good time doing it. And again, the fact that I'd been around just long enough and he had a great background as a producer, the first time directing thing was never an issue of power or do what I say or this is the way I see it. We just really worked well together and had a good time.
Well, I think your death scene in Freddy's Nightmares might be one of the top ones, given that you were on a bed and then raised to where spikes are on the wall, if you remember that scene.
I got to tell you the truth. I didn't remember it until you said it. Honest to goodness. I had to go look up just to see the names of the other people in the episode. You'll have to forgive me. I've done about 200 episodes of television.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And that's not one that's foremost in my mind. And anything you tell me about it is coming back to me as almost new information.
Okay.
And when you say death scene, I go right back to the Blob because there's some website out there that has that as like the number 12 all-time death.
Nice.
There's a distinction. Again, when you're getting that BA in drama, yeah, I want to be the number 12 all-time death scene in film.
So jumping back to Nightmare on Elm Street 3 for a sec, you have it was one of Patricia Arquette's first roles, and
Yes.
Your scenes with her, she's going nuts, and you're trying to restrain her. Was that as physically challenging as it looked?
She's damn good.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you anything you don't know. How many awards has she won by this time? I mean, we know her now to be the phenomenal woman and actress that she is. I mean, just phenomenal to watch her work. And at that time, again, young kids, and as I said about filmmakers, these were not kids who were like, I'm going to be a star. These were kids who were really committed to doing their roles. Her and Jennifer, these people, the two of them particularly stand out in my mind as getting as deep into the work as they could. And so you were never playing at a character. These kids were being that human being in that moment. So when she let go and went for it, she really let go and went for it. She just put herself in that moment, in that place, and let go. Yeah. That was as rough as it looks. Mm-hmm. And of course, with any stunt, any gag that you do, you totally choreograph it to reduce any opportunity, any chance of injury. Safety is paramount on a set. But once you know the strictures, once you know the parameters, it's rock and roll time. And man, she went for it. I can actually say, I do remember the sense after that scene, the sense of joy I had having been in a complete and filling moment like that.
Oh, fantastic.
Again, I'm so glad that we're talking about this film because it was such a wonderful, positive experience for me.
And do you remember any scenes that you filmed that didn't make it into the final cut of the movie?
I'm a pretty rare guy as to how fortunate I've been. Mm-hmm. I can only think of one scene in my career, and I've been doing this 48 years now. Mm-hmm. I can think of 3 scenes that got cut out over 48 years. None that I did on that film. And again, testament to Chuck Russell, the filmmaker. I can't believe how many pats he's getting on the back from me here. He knew the film he wanted to shoot. Mm-hmm. He wrote the film he wanted to shoot. So there was no wasted effort there. What we shot in the scenes that I worked, what we shot ended up on screen. And that's a mark of a man who knows what he wants, has a sense of what he's going to create and what he's going to do to get it. That's making film. You know, it's like I was tremendously fortunate recently it's a couple of years ago now, to work with Clint Eastwood in Sully. The efficiency that comes from knowing what you want and knowing what you need to do to get it, and knowing that you've hired all the right people for all the right jobs. On an Eastwood set, there's no second guessing. You don't have to check with Clint. It's just, is this what you want? Yes, it is. Clint hired me to do this. That's what we're doing. You whisper into a microphone in a wrist. The next set is set up and ready to rock. It's why he comes in under budget and under time on every picture he ever makes. He knows beforehand everything that's going to end up on the screen. It was a little bit like that. Which Chuck knew what he wanted. He knew what he was going to shoot, whether it was his first picture or not. He had produced before. He knows the craft. Boom. This is what we do. That's how we make this movie, and that's the film we're putting up on the screen. And
do you happen to remember where it was filmed? I know where the exterior of the building is. I actually work right by there and walk by it all the time. But was that a hospital where it was filmed?
I wish I could remember, and I can't.
Okay.
You know, I see it's 1987, right?
Yeah, quite a while ago.
Yeah, that's more than a minute and a half. That's before my kid was born, for God's sake.
A little off topic, but I just wanted to ask you about Knots Landing, because I've watched all the seasons of that show, and you were in a lot of episodes as the confidant for Abby, the antagonist. Abby. Yeah, I wanted to know what that was like.
What a treat! What a joy, Donna Mills. Mm-hmm. You know, that was my first real. I think that was my first real gig in LA. Mm-hmm. I had done some beer commercial. I had worked on the East Coast in Atlanta, and ABC found me here and brought me out there. And well, here's how I how it all comes together for me. I'm going to give you a little backstory. I tell no short stories. I only tell. I move into I get my first rent my first real house. Three of us rent houses alongside each other on the same day. We throw a 3-house housewarming party up above Woodrow Wilson. It goes from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. In the middle of the night, someone says, "Whose house is this?" And someone else says, "Clayton Landy." And I hear Clayton Landy. And I turn around and I look at the guy sitting on a desk. We had gone to high school together. His name was Scott Lane. And Scott was putting together a theater company. The next Saturday, we met in the back room at the Whiskey. And there were 12 of us. One was the videographer from Woodstock. One happened to be Lynn Shay. We improv'd every day. And then Scott went home and wrote from the improvs. And we created a play called American Gothic, which created the Los Angeles Theater Unit, which went on for 12 years and won every award there was to win for any waiver theater. And the job was, you got to get everybody's doing their first play in LA, and we got to get people to see it. And you get a casting director, and you get a casting director, and somebody got Melinda Gartzman to come down from, all of a sudden I can't think of the name it was over on the Sony lot. And so someone else got her to come. I ended up getting seen for Knots Landing, and they hired me to do 3, maybe 5. I did 5 out of 9 of the first season. I ended up doing 24 episodes. And the very first episode, Donna Mills meets her attorney, and that's me. And we shoot the scene, and she turns to the producer and says, "Can I have an affair with him?" And I said, "I don't care if she means in front of the camera or off camera. I'm good." It was, again, just one of those joy-filled experiences. Donna Mills and I worked so well together that the writers would come down to watch us work and then go back and write scenes for us for the following week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And let me tell you, for your first gig in Hollywood, and you get that kind of action, that kind of response, that you're doing something that they actually want to build on. Oh, my God. I mean, my brain exploded. That was really what really set it off for me in LA. That was a tremendous, tremendous experience. Donna, I wouldn't say she was a mentor, but she certainly taught me every day I worked with her. It was a great cast to work with, a fun group of people. And again, as a young actor, man, I was learning every day on that set. It was the first time I was ever invited into dailies. I was a sponge. Just let me soak up everything you want to teach me. Great opportunity.
Well, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. You played a really fun character. It was really fun watching those episodes.
Thanks. It was fun to do. The 80s was sort of my Sleaze R Us decade. It was. I was either the good guy going bad or the bad guy going good, or the guy just living in that gray area for the entire decade.
Dynasty as well. You were like a hotel manager for.
Yeah, I did a half a dozen dynasties or a handful of dynasties. Well, here you go. You knew it wasn't going to be a long running role. I was the Carringtons lived in a hotel, and I was the general manager of the hotel. And the hotel burned down on my watch. So that wasn't going to run. I do remember working with John Forsythe on that, who had been Bachelor Father and Charlie's Angels, and now here he is on Dynasty. And I've been very fortunate to work with a couple of real gentlemen, longtime actors in the business, who understood what it meant to be a human being. This was as humble a performer as ever. He's the star of the series. He had 3 series that he was the star and done films. And he actually said to me, he came up in the actor's studio with Marlon Brando. Right, there we go. Full circle. And he said, "I always knew I wasn't going to be a Brando, but I always knew I could make a living." And he spent that entire day with me. We just hung out between scenes and talked, and he was one of the most lovely human beings you could ever ask to spend a day with, as opposed to Joan Collins, who who didn't say good morning to me and didn't say good night. Any word that wasn't on the script, I didn't hear it. But these were polar opposite human beings. I'll tell you. And he reminded me of, I did, while I was doing Knots Landing, I did my first movie of the week. It was The September Gun. It was also my first Western. And we were out in Old Tucson, and it was me, John Grise. John Grise and I played brothers, Jonathan Grise. Mm-hmm. And Chris Lloyd was our father. Chris is like 8 years older than me. He was my father. and we're having this, and Sally Kellerman, and oh my God, Patty Duke. Patty Duke played a nun who was in distress. And Robert Preston was the September Gun who came to her rescue. And we were the bad boys, me and Johnny and Chris. And Robert Preston was the greatest gentleman I ever had the pleasure of spending time with in this lifetime. Mr. Preston treated absolutely every human being that he came in contact with the exact same level of attention and respect. Someone off the street would come up to him to talk to him, an extra, the director, the producer. It did not matter. And talk about a life lesson. Well, there's no reason for me to get a big head. If Robert Preston can treat everyone like a human being, I guess I ought to learn something from that. It was tremendous. And the director on that was Rod Taylor, who had been in Father of the Bride with Spencer Tracy and Elizabeth Taylor. He was the groom. Between the two of them, Rod and Robert, they had over 120 years in show business. And I'll tell you what, you didn't have to pay me to do that film. I would have paid you just to spend every night at the bar with them, which we did. And it's going back to stories. I heard show business stories from show business royalty. It was, firsthand accounts of the Marx Brothers and John Barrymore. I mean, just incredible, incredible stories that I'll remember for a lifetime.
Hearing your stories about the attitudes from actors on set, I feel that's probably beneficial for you as the president for SAG, since you understand how people can be on and off screen.
Oh, yeah. It always seems that the people have no right to it, believe they should be treated like divas.
Yeah.
And the people who have really earned it know better. And you see it over and over and over again. Golda Meir had a phrase that I dearly love. It was, "Don't be so humble. You're not that great." And yeah, in this position now, it having been through all of this, and now having the opportunity to give back, I'm kind of sitting in the chair going, all right, you could stop the bullshit because I don't have time for your nonsense. But these people over here really deserve attention, and they're going to get focused on. You go feed your own ego. I'll be back to you in a little while.
You've done so much in your career. Is there a dream role that you'd like to play but haven't yet?
Yeah, there is. And I'm about to do something else that's really quite brilliant. Yeah, the one that I've only been able to do in classwork and take my own time to work with coaches just to work on the role. The great love for me is, and any actor my age, for God's sakes, Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. I mean, that's the mountaintop for me. And every time along the way when I felt like I really need to sharpen, I'll choose a very talented woman actor, female actor, and get a coach, and we'll work on a scene from that show just to sharpen my skills. Mm-hmm. On the other end, I did play to get into. I was again fortunate, BA in drama. I did study with Brando by invitation, but the greater teacher was his teacher. I was fortunate enough to audition for and be accepted. I spent the summer in master's classes with Stella Adler, and for Stella, we did a scene as the brothers Biff and Hap to get into that class. But Miller and Williams are my two favorite playwrights in the American canon. I'm very fortunate. And next month go into rehearsal for Indecent, play that 2 seasons ago won a couple Tony Awards. Brilliant, beautiful, I think deeply meaningful play for our times. That will be down here. We'll be doing the Southeastern premiere of that. It's, I think, particularly interesting right now. This is a play that was written in 1906 in a shtetl, a Yiddish shtetl in Poland, that went on to sell out houses across Europe, came to the United States, sold out on the Lower East Side, moved to Greenwich Village, then translated into English and transferred to the Broadway stage, and the entire cast and the producer were arrested for indecency, because at the heart of the play is a love story between 2 women. So Love Isn't Love was being written about in a small little town in Yiddish theater in Poland in 1906, and came to America and couldn't be accepted in America.
Yeah.
They kept prostitution, they kept pimps. That was fine, but a love between 2 women, God forbid. And and there you have, and it's really 7 of us will be playing over 40 roles, tied together with music, dance. We cover 50 years and 3 continents in this play. And I think it really teaches us about love, humanity. It's about censorship. It's about art. What is art? What is love? And I will tell you the truth. The first 12 times I read the play, I couldn't get through it without crying. It's that beautifully written by Paula Vogel, who has, for previous work, won a Pulitzer.
If they were to revive Freddy's Nightmares, would you be willing to act in it again?
I am so open to any good offer, I can't even tell you.
Fair enough.
Actually, offer any actor who desires work a good role and see how fast he takes it,
Fair enough.
Actually, very surprising to me. I'll tell you, I'm now in Atlanta. This is our 11th year back here. And we came here to retire, bought a beautiful home on a lake, going to go fishing in the backyard. 6 months later, the tax incentives hit. And much to my surprise, instead of sitting in a fishing boat, I've been doing film, TV, theater, commercials. Here I am now, president of the local. I've actually had 2 of my most fulfilling years in the business since I've been back here. I did a beautiful play, Warrior Class, at the Alliance Theater. Brilliant play. And 15 episodes of a Tyler Perry series and 3 features and 3 national commercials that year. It was like, oh, and this is what retirement looks like, huh? That's not bad,
No, that's really great. I'm happy.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks for saying so. I am completely and totally surprised that, having been in the business, well, first of all, I can't believe I've been in the business this long. It's stunning to actually make what other people consider a living, doing the art that you love, being able to do what you're passionate about and have that mean something, and to still be doing it at this age is really quite surprising and delicious for me. And the fact that, believe me, the fact that you even want to talk to me about anything I've done in the business, never mind something that meant so much to you, I can't tell you. No, I got to tell you, that's a real joy for me. That's a real joy for me. And I thank you for the request. Never mind that spending the time has been nothing but fun for me.
Oh, so good. Thank you for asking. Thank you. No, I really enjoyed your stories, especially when you mentioned that when you are on set, it's about what you're going to give instead of what you're going to get.
Why do you want to be a part of this production, in the sense of what is it that you're bringing to the table? Mm-hmm. What do you have to offer? Why did you choose to work on this piece of material? It's a must. You've got, in this business, hell, in life, you have to be on the give. It can't be much in direct opposition to what we're seeing going on in our country at the moment. It's about give, not about what you get.
Well, thank you again so very much. I hope you had at least half as much fun as we did. This was great. Thank you so much.
Well, you brought me down memory lane. What a treat this was. Thank you so much. I
Thank
wish
you. It was
guys
such an
all the
honor to
best.
talk with you.
Only my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please join us next week where we talk about Freddy's Nightmares, Season 2, Episode 19, Family Affair, where Freddy teaches us to just say no.